Well, thanks to the coordinators for having me. It's a huge honor to be here. I'm Peter Chalmers, and I was tasked to talk about Inset glenoids. What does this mean, Inset? So traditionally, our glenoid is onlay, which means it sits on the face of the glenoid. There's also historically been an inlay, which means that the face of the glenoid is parallel or level with the face of the glenoid. The inset is in between the two, which is that part of the glenoid component is inset inside the face, and part of it is on top of the face. And you can also do a partial inset, which the idea there would be that you use that inset concept to try and correct some of the deformity within the glenoid. So the idea behind this is that when you inset the glenoid, it's like a manhole cover in a manhole thing. And then you can drive over this and it doesn't displace. So I wanted to talk about this biomechanical concept. This has been tested. So in a finite element model, Gunther showed that it's dramatically more stable than an onlay. It's also been tested in a more traditional cadaveric biomechanical model that shows that with a traditional onlay, after about 1,000 cycles, it's loose, whereas with an inlay, it's solid at 4,000 cycles. I wanted to talk about this biomechanical concept because it's different from the way we've traditionally done the glenoid. So I want to talk about it from a perspective that's been personal for me recently. Last summer, I built a treehouse for my children, and this is the picture of my treehouse. And to build the treehouse, I did a lot of research to figure out how do you anchor the treehouse to the tree. And when I did the research online, I discovered there's actually a guy who spent his entire life figuring this out. He's in Oregon, and you can see this is a picture of the treehouse he built on the right. I didn't build that. And you can see that platform is anchored with 8 bolts. And those bolts have a specific design that he's developed that giant platform where you can stand at the end, and those 8 bolts anchor the platform to the tree. This is the bolt that he's designed, and I would argue that it's the same as an inset component. It's called a Garnier bolt, and the basic way that it works is it has our traditional bolt that screws in, and then it has this shoulder part that's supposed to be inset into the wood. And this is how this works. So a traditional bolt, similar to a peg on a glenoid component, is just put into the wood or put into the bone here. And you can see this is him loading it with a pneumatic press to 1500 psi, and you can see how it's starting to cut out in the wood. This is the exact same thing that's happening in our traditional glenoid component when we have that rocking horse phenomenon. This is with the Garnier bolt, and you can see now he's loading with that same pneumatic press, and it's got that inset into the wood. And this is going to show him he's up to 2,000 psi with no movement whatsoever. And then you can see him in this video loaded to 3,000 psi and then all the way to 4,000 psi with the same pneumatic press. And it's not until 4,000 psi that you start to see this cut out. So this is, again, the same concept biomechanically that we're using with an inlay or an inset component. And the benefit here then is that it has that shoulder in addition to an increased surface area that prevents it from moving within the wood. Okay, what are the disadvantages of this concept? So disadvantage number 1 is you have to remove more bone to get that done. You have to violate the subchondral plate, and this theoretically could complicate revision surgery. You've created now a cavitary defect within the glenoid that you're going to have to address. It has to be circular with today's components, and this is a big problem because the glenoid is not circular, right? So theoretically then you have poor coverage, you have residual pain, you have more edge loading. There's currently no clinical evidence of superiority, and it's still relatively new. I would argue revision's not all that complicated. So this is me revising an inset component. It's actually inset a little bit so I can get a gouge into it, and then I can get the whole thing out. So you just drive a gouge in, and then you can see here there's actually not a huge cavitary defect, in part because I've come across the pegs. And then from here you put in a pin and you do your traditional glenoid from here. So here's the clinical evidence thus far. You can see there are 7 studies, 4 with inlay, 3 with inset, that have reasonable follow-up. Of the inset, you can see that Gunther's study is out to about 9 years, 100% survival. All of these have pretty good survival. None of them are 15-year studies. So what is the long-term hold? We don't know, but in the short term, this seems to work pretty well. Here's what I would argue for. The inset is best, I think, right now for the B3 or the C glenoid, the glenoid where you don't have a lot of real estate and you're worried. Osteoarthritis with better bone quality in a younger patient, and theoretically a rounder glenoid that is a better fit for. I would argue it's certainly contraindicated for a compromised cuff or a previously instrumented glenoid. And then I think this is not going to be an option for the osteoporotic or elderly patient because it's so reliant on that shoulder concept And because once you violate the subchondral plate in an older patient, there's not a lot of bone there to really provide much stability. But I think that it's potential in the future for everyone, and it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. And as longer-term evidence comes due and more components come onto the market, I think it's something we're going to be talking about more and more. Thank you.